this is a special meeting, a work session to continue our discussion and hopefully finalize our, what we're now calling the Fiscal Recovery Task Force. And we have invited back again Tim Joshua from Awasta, and he's been very gracious to come help us get this completed tonight.
No problem.
Thank you.
Thank you. So the goal tonight is to leave with an outline of a plan that someone here at the district can then type up, and the board would then take official action at your next meeting to approve the plan by motion and second and vote. Tonight, some decision making we can do by consensus when we fill out kind of a template of this plan. We can kind of do a thumbs up or a thumbs down, thumbs sideways. So a thumbs up is love it. This is good, I'm 100% behind it. A thumbs sideways is not perfect, but I can live with it, and we'd move on. A thumbs down is deal breaker, but if you put a thumbs down, you've got to have an alternative and a rationale for why. Those fair rules?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. We can't just thumbs down everything, and thumbs down is why, and what would your plan be? You got to come up with a solution. We're going to move rather quickly because we went through quite a bit last time. So,
Can I interrupt?
Sure.
I just want to also add that Dr. Watts was going to be on the phone, but he's unable to make it tonight, and Denise Director Daniels is also unable to make it tonight.
no problem.
So,
So going through my memory from last time and going through the notes that were typed up, I pulled out the components of a fiscal recovery task force plan. So these are the things we need to answer tonight. So the first thing we need to do is talk about the objective, because there's no point having a task force if you don't have the objective. So we'll go back to the notes, we'll talk briefly about that, we'll read some sentence on that and write the objective in. Then membership. Membership is the composition and selection. What are the types of seats we're going to have on the task force, and then how are those seats filled? Then scope of authority, and closely linked to scope of authority is the charge or tasks. And we'll talk about, I'm going to recommend just one for now, and then have it say others to be determined by the board, because really the first thing is going to be building that dashboard with the metrics. Okay? And then the last piece is the duration of the task force, how long does it exist, and the frequency of meetings. So what would happen here is, like I said, we'll put the plan together, and then the board adopts the plan, and the plan goes into action, and then there will be other pieces of this that need to come to the board for approval. So on the objective, we talked about how you as a board, in your fund balance policy, get to set what you feel your fund balance should be. That is the board's authority. You want to have 1 month's salary and benefits. You want to have 2 months total expenditures. You want to have 3%, 8%. You guys get to decide that. Right now, we believe that it is 5%. Is that correct? 5%. That is 5% of the average of 5% of your budgeted revenue, or 5% of your budgeted expenditures. What is that 5%?
5% of the prior year expenditure.
5% of prior year expenditure. My advice would be the objective would be, for the task force, would be to assist the board in monitoring key metrics of the district finances in support of the board's fund balance policy. So basically the goal is to get to that 5%, and so this task force's job is to assist the board in monitoring. We can change the verbiage here, I mean, the wordsmith, throw it out here, but I think that 5% of that fund balance policy is your objective, is to reach that. Is that correct? So,
I think it's going to be reach and hold, so it's not just reach and then great, task force is done.
no.
It's reach and hold for an amount of time, it is. But
We didn't talk about that.
sure.
Right, because that's what we talked about. When we get to that point, we would disband the task force and then move on to a budget committee of some sort. So do we want to discuss that?
Sure, so a task force is typically by nature something that comes in does a task is over, it dissolves. I think the Kent School District would be well served by having a finance committee made up of citizens and employees and some groups that is advisory in nature, that is not decision-making, but advisory, because you cannot abdicate your authority as elected officials. I think that the types of things that a finance committee would do, like review exit items from audits, review and assist in recommendations for annual budget preparation, those types of things, I think are different than what a fiscal recovery task force is basically keeping eyes on a dashboard until you get to your destination. So that's my advice. However, sustained improvement over time is important. You don't want to get, we talked last time that fiscal recovery is a 3, 4, 5-year process. It is not a 1-year process. It is not a 6-month piece. So it will take some time. But I think that if the board is the one who by action creates the task force, then the board by action disbands the task force. So when we talk about duration, that's where we would need to put some language in here in what you adopt at your next meeting that honors the intent of what your desire is.
Right, just because if I don't want it to be too narrow, because the fund balance changes month to month, and it's high and it's low based on how it goes in. And we want to say like, okay, just because the fund balance gets to a certain point, the task force may not have done anything to get it there. We don't say, okay, they're done. We want an output from them. That also helps get to the fund balance.
You bring up a very good point, because if you take the money you get from the state, your apportionment, you don't get the same amount every month. Some months you get 5.5%, some months you get 11%. It depends on the cash flow of the state. So if you get a lot of money up front, there are months that you have a lot of money in the bank, knowing you get less over here and you need that for cash flow reasons. So I think that your target would be a year-end fund balance at 5% of the previous year's expenditures. And Ben, jump in if I'm out of line on here, but when you measure that, the key metrics you're going to look at are going to be projected fund balance on a monthly basis, because you won't know the actual till the end, and a few other things, enrollment, there's a few other key metrics that you're going to take a look at. But when you actually take your evaluation of where the district finances are, it has to be year end, because that's when the bills have been paid, the money's been deposited, and you know what you truly have. And who's taking notes tonight? Okay, great. So I'm going to paraphrase on here, and then if you guys at the district level, you can actually create the sentence that says what the objective is. But basically, the objective is going to be year end at 5% of prior year expenditures. That's the objective or the goal to get to. Membership. We talked on the composition. I'm going to write this one over here because we're going to need more space. Sorry for my handwriting. I'm close to brain surgeon with my penmanship. So we talked about the size. You don't want a task force to collapse under its own weight, but you do want to have enough representation to be able to hear voice from stakeholders. So we talked about 10. Now it doesn't have to be 10. Could be 8, could be 12. But when we talked about 10, here's what we talked about last time. 3 people from the staff. So you'd have 1 cert, 1 classified, 1 admin. Okay, then you would have 2 from PTA. And I know that you've got multiple schools and multiple PTAs, but we'll talk a little bit about selection. I don't think you can have 1 PTA member from every school. I think it'd be a little big. 1 from a booster. And we talked about the reason why the difference between PTA and a booster is that they view things through different lenses. Whereas they both fundraise, but a PTA oftentimes will work on assemblies, they work on academic stuff, things like that, where boosters are more on the arts, music, athletics, those types of things. 1 local business. We also talked a little bit about the fact that my grandfather, small businessman, his whole life, when I went into education, he said, you just gotta run it like a business. You can't do that. Public and private is completely different set of variables. So you don't fill a fiscal recovery task force with all business folks, but you would be remiss if you didn't include at least one or two, because there are some great components in the business world that can assist and have an eye on it. So I would suggest one local business person, a community leader, perhaps someone from your local chamber of commerce, along those lines. One person from the ESD, from Puget Sound ESD, and we talked a little bit about the person that your district's already working with, that's already intimate with your members. Sometimes they can be a great liaison between the district office and district administration and this group, because they are an outside entity. While they don't necessarily have direct oversight, sometimes they can be a phenomenal resource to explain the intricacies of education finance. You can have someone who is incredibly connected and well-versed in the world of finance, and education finance still has a few little tweaks. So the ESD folks would be great to help. And then, so that is at 8, and then down here, I'm going to put a star by this one. You already have, what was it, CBRC? What would CBRC stand for again? It was
Citizens Budget Review Committee.
correct. So 2 from your CBRC. And it might be that what you do is after the task force reaches the district reaches the objective, might be that the CRBC gets reconstituted or reauthorized, and they are your budget committee. And some of these members or these groups might end up on that. But again, the objective is the objective for the district in creating the task force. Put a star by it, because I'll jump into the selection piece and then we'll talk about all the membership in a whole. The board, you can't abdicate your authority. I recommend that you approve all the members, but that you don't select them. So the selection needs to be independent. However, you need to come up with a process. Because you already have the CBRC, I recommend that the board selects 2 people from the CBRC to be the screeners. So of that, you guys discuss, pick 2 people, and then you also come up with a very simple application, and you put it out there. Any teacher, any classified, any admin, any PTA member, any booster club member, any local business person, they can all fill out the application. I mean, simple, 1 page, why I want to be on this. The 2 members that you appoint, they go through and screen and make selected recommendations to you, and then you approve. Ultimately, you're the one making the decision, but then you're not selecting them. So that's what I would recommend for your membership and selection piece. So I'd open that up to, I saw some people nodding heads yes, some people shaking heads no, so what are your thoughts on that?
Well, we had a CBRC, and we don't anymore.
So I would recommend that you select 2 citizens that used to be
Yeah,
on
we
it.
have some from past members here, right?
Correct.
We could definitely, right.
Right, so I think what you do is because they have familiarity with the district already, I think, and you're on you want to expedite this process, I think that rather than you could have past CRBC members apply and you do interviewing and screening, but however, if you do have the authority as a board to simply appoint citizens. So my recommendation is to expedite it. I would select 2 and appoint them, and I would have the district come up with a simple application process. Name, connection to district, how do you fit, what category, check the box for which category you're in, how do you feel you can contribute to this group, in 500 words or less, tell us why you want to be in this group type of thing. And then have those 2 members screen them, have a deadline when they're turned in, and then they come to a board meeting And again, you will take action to approve the plan and create the task force, and then the next board meeting, take action to appoint the members. So other thoughts about that? This is only one way of doing it. There's a whole myriad of ways this could be done.
It wasn't involved in the last CVRC, so there's a slight concern that if we use people who've already been involved, then we're not gonna get new ideas. And if we need a fiscal recovery, and we're looking for new ideas, doesn't necessarily guarantee that we won't get them. But we need, I don't know, someone who wants to get involved and maybe not got involved in the past, and maybe what we're looking for. I don't know, screen for that, or select that, but that's one concern.
I think we could be looking at the list of people that have been on CVRC before. I think we could find people that would be comfortable with. And we had talked before that we would have the KSD person be kind of the leader of the group to help be the monitor and walk through things.
You would need to, I cannot negotiate arrangements on your behalf, so you would need to contact them and say, hey, we're doing this. Is that something you could do? Definitely. So once you get this plan together, I would contact them and see. If they aren't available to, then I would look at, if they aren't available, you might want to see if there would be a finance person from an outside district. I don't know. What do you think about that, Matt? Who else would you bring in as the K-12 finance expert if Puget Sound ESD couldn't do it? I don't know if TJ Kelly would have time. I don't think he'd have time.
Yeah.
I do think whoever we bring should have some understanding and knowledge about the district, and is, I don't know, I would look at the constituent.
I think Ben would be great at that, but we need to keep your district staff separate from the task force. Maybe we cross that bridge when we come to it.
I mean, I don't know, I think the CBRC, just going back to that, I don't know if they, I'm trying to think, would they be, they have history, but would they necessarily just bring in old information? I don't know, this is going back to 2011, is when we began to
Well, also remember that this is a monitoring task force. So what they're going to be doing is they're going to take us, they're going to work to make suggestions to create a dashboard. It's basically a series of reports or charts. 4 or 5 things they're going to look at monthly. Then they're going to get the numbers, they're going to populate the charts, and they're going to come to the board and say, here's your dashboard for this month. So this is not necessarily a think tank that's going to come in and say, we recommend that you reduce fuel expenditures by 4%, and then you, so this isn't necessarily a think tank that is making recommendations at first. This is an oversight monitoring task force so that your citizens and your employees are keeping an eye on the numbers as well. Now, in the tasks, you can do other tasks assigned. Once you get a couple months in and that becomes routine, then you can add additional charges to them. And you might say, we're considering X or Y. Why don't we put it to the task force and ask their opinion on it? So they're advisory in capacity. But in the conversation we had last time, this wasn't necessarily a group that would be coming up with internal control process. Right.
So I see like the CBRC, whoever it is, the 2 people screening, for the expertise to be able to review some of this information, and not necessarily bringing in ideas from the past, but looking at data as is and advising us on, or advising the district. on how to meet that fund balance. So I don't see it as a budget committee making decisions.
Right.
That's
I think I'm a mid-thumb on that. I went
You're,
with it.
okay.
So where
Just
are,
because I don't know. I have a lot of I don't knows
Sure.
about what we're doing with that.
so where are we on the thumbs for this composition and selection process? Okay, so, do we need, beyond membership, do we need to go into detail on the application piece or any of that? Or is that enough that do you have enough from here that you can kind of capture the intent of this? Okay, okay, perfect. Scope of authority. We talked last time about how quickly folks get disenfranchised when their charge and their scope of authority are not clear. So people come in thinking, we are the budget oversight group, and we are going to say yes or no, and we're going to vote expenditures up and down. I've seen similar task force or groups for fiscal recovery. Members sign up, and in their mind, they think that they're going to approve monthly payroll or not, or approve whether that class goes on that field trip and how much does it cost, and want to look at the gas bill and the electric bill. That is not what this group would do. That would paralyze the district operations. I put way too many cooks in the kitchen. So what we talked about as far as scope of authority is that they would be advisory, that they would monitor key metrics, and that they would report monthly to the board, those key metrics. Is there anything else on the scope of, and we'll do scope of authority and charge of tasks together. So scope of authority is that they are an advisory group to the board. Under the charge and tasks, the first one would be to identify 3 to 5 metrics. And a metric would be something like monthly payroll, monthly salary and benefits would be a great metric. Check that, monthly salary and benefits compared to budget. So are you over or under monthly and year to date? That's a simple report that can be run out of Skyward. So everybody, the district and the task force has the same set of numbers, and they drop it into an Excel graph, so it's a visual representation as a dashboard, and then they can see it. That would be a metric. Other metrics that they could take a look at: enrollment. You could take a look at monthly vouchers, expenditures. You're looking at money in, money out. Those types of things. If you're going for fund balance, projected, but everyone needs to know right off the bat that those projections swing wildly depending on quite a few variables. So identify 3 to 5 metrics, then, and I would do that in consultation with business office. Same time, your business office has a job to do. Your district office has a job to do, and while it is important to have citizens assisting with monitoring the metrics, we don't want to end up creating something that takes 10 or 20% of your business office's time. You want them doing the job you're paying them to do. So I would say in consultation, and the other thing too, is that the business office, I mean, Ben and that team, they know a lot about education funding, and they can readily identify, here's your gas gauge, here's your barometer, you know, here's your speedometer, and so they can assist with that. So the second thing would be to create the dashboard, and really that is just, I mean, that's a series of Excel. You drop the numbers into Excel and it populates charts, and you can keep that as a template. So over time, that doesn't become too cumbersome. I would recommend that what happens is there's a certain date. This would be once a month, report to the board by a week before the board meeting, a certain set of numbers come out, you have to time that with when month end closes, so you're dealing with current data. They get the numbers, they populate it, they share it with the business office, and then together, at one board meeting each month, your business office and whoever these people decide their leader is, get up in front of the board meeting and co-present the numbers. So here you've got the district and the citizen task force on the same page, sharing the same set of numbers, good, bad, or ugly. That shows your community that there's some support. So that would be monthly report to board. Then the fourth would be educate the community. And when I say community, I mean your paraeducator that's on there educates the paraeducators, your teacher educates the teachers. Your local business person is sharing the metrics at Chamber of Commerce. So the idea is that they are your marketing team. They're your cheerleaders, they're the ones going out and saying, okay, this is what we're doing, this is what we're looking at, here's where it is. So there's common ownership in voice about what's going on with your recovery. So the last piece is other tasks as assigned. You may find out that this group and what they're doing is helpful and this is great and that's enough, or you may decide as a board that in 6 months, this is a well-oiled machine and you're like, you know what? Why don't we have to look at something else? Why don't we give them another charge? But you always, when you create the task force by board action, always put that other duties as assigned piece in there, because then they may come to you and recommend and say, hey, we would really like to also do this. And you as a board can say, sure. Or you can say, nah, just keep doing this. That's up to you. Or you may, or Ben, or your superintendent, they may say, gosh, can we have them do this as well? And so you always want to leave that door open. So this would be, scope of authority would be advisory to the board, and the charge and tasks would be here. Is there anything that is missing or that you wouldn't want on there?
I have a question on the first one. So when we talked about it before, we mentioned that we'd have the task force help with defining what those are. And obviously we need some recommendation of what top things are important right from us. The way it's written right there, when we were talking about it, it kind of felt like we're telling them what the top, and then they just have to create the dashboard. I'd like to get some buy-in from the committee on what the ones they're monitoring.
Sure. So for example, when I say in consultation with the business office, let's say for example that the business office says, here are 10 pieces of data, types of data that we look at every month. These are 10 different metrics that we're monitoring. Here they are. Task force then says which ones they think are important enough to include. I wouldn't do all 10, it'd become too cumbersome. But, for example, if the task force came in, and I'm gonna do something silly, but a task force comes in and says, we wanna know how many 3rd grade students eat lunch with their left hand. If that's not data you already collect, then you have to hire somebody to stand there and count. Then again, it's not an assistance, it's a burden. It's a more drawn system. So in consultation with the business office is to make sure that the metrics they're looking at are things that you are already collecting data on, so that it's not additional creation. It's just simply analysis of the numbers. Because again,